Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on the weekend of November the 11th and 12th, 2023. My theme in this video is going to be the Mars-Uranus opposition, because this weekend there is a Mars-Uranus opposition. It sort of takes place in the evening if you're in Western Europe, sort of evening of Saturday if you're in Western Europe, in the afternoon if you're in the Americas. It will take place on Sunday if you're in Australia or New Zealand. So this Mars opposition Uranus has a bad reputation. It's supposed to be a dramatic aspect, and so I want to look at this aspect in terms of some of the people who have this conjunction. For example, Anthony Fauci, he has a Mars-Uranus opposition. I talked about Nikki Haley, the former governor of South Carolina, also got a Mars-Uranus opposition. There are events. The first hydrogen bomb happened when there was a Mars-Uranus opposition. So I'll be looking at the Mars-Uranus opposition in general, and I will try to relate it to some famous people. But before I do that, I want to look at the astrology and the I Ching for this weekend, which is the weekend of November the 11th and 12th, 2023. So here we go. Now, top right, that is Anthony Fauci, not wearing any glasses. I don't know when that picture was taken. What's going on? Well, the moon moves into Scorpio this weekend. It actually moves into Scorpio if you're in London at 6:39 p.m. So if you're in Europe for most of Saturday, 6:39 p.m. on Saturday is when it moves in. So if you're in Europe for most of Saturday, the moon will actually be in late Libra. If you're in I don't know, East Asia, Europe, Australasia, the moon will be in Libra. Will be in Libra all day. So it kind of depends where you are. If you're in New York, moon goes into Scorpio at 1:39 p.m. If you're in Los Angeles, 10:39 a.m. So if you're on the west coast of America, you've got the moon in Scorpio pretty much all weekend. Unless you get up early. I mean, unless you get up before 10:39 a.m. on Saturday morning. So this moon in Scorpio influence, by Sunday it's certainly going to be with us all, but there is a certain dependency on time zone. So in general, moon going into Scorpio is not good news. The moon becomes very weak when it enters Scorpio. Reason being is that the moon is fallen in Scorpio. The moon is exalted in Taurus, and therefore it's fallen in Taurus. It's fallen in Scorpio. So the moon really doesn't work very well in Scorpio. Yes, Scorpio is an emotional sign, but those emotions can be sort of brooding, can be trapped, can be blocked. There can be a lot of viciousness, vindictiveness, thoughts of revenge, and so on. So all things being equal, it's not great. I mean, there are some good points about the moon in Scorpio. It's certainly emotionally aware. Moon in Scorpio tends to know what other people are thinking and feeling. But sometimes moon in Scorpio can be so subjective, so into itself that it doesn't really register fully what's going on. So that gives you an idea about what the weekend is going to be like, particularly on Sunday, from a perspective of the moon in Scorpio. The moon in Scorpio is problematic for other reasons. It's also the via combustor. So the via combustor, I talked about it yesterday. I talked about it on Friday. The moon, the via combustor, is this part of the sky between 15 Libra and 15 Scorpio. And when the moon is going through this part of the sky, things just happen. Things don't go as expected. Now, it's not a big deal because the moon, it's not a particularly big deal at least, because the moon is in the via combustor every month. There is a period of a couple of days when the moon is in the via combustor. So it's not an unusual event, but it's something we do need to consider. And this weekend the moon is in early Scorpio. The degree of maximum fall for the moon is 3 degrees Scorpio. So the moon is not well placed. And in addition, the moon is having a run up to a new moon. There is a new moon. There's a new moon on Monday. In fact, if you're, I think if you're in the Americas, you might be, if you're in the Americas, you might be getting that new moon might actually be late on Sunday. So, when the moon is moving towards a conjunction of the sun, it's still a bit wide. In sort of traditional astrology, would be described as being under sunbeams. There's sunbeams is when a planet gets rather close to the sun. When it gets very close to the sun, it's combust. So the moon is under sunbeams. So that weakens the moon. So there is a weak moon, and that's so anything to do with emotion, relationships, etc., needs to be treated with great caution. And there's another thing going on, which I've just talked about in the introduction, and there is an opposition between Mars and Uranus. You can see there's Mars 21-22 Scorpio, and there's Uranus at 21-08 Taurus. So we're probably already starting to feel this. Now this opposition, it's exact. I think it's exact in London around 9. I think it's off the top of my head 9:11 p.m. on Saturday. So it'll be exact earlier in the Americas, later in sort of Asia, Australasia. But it's not just exactitude that matters. It's just a general fact that we've got this opposition this Mars-Uranus opposition over the weekend, and it certainly colours my forecasts of the 12 signs. Mars-Uranus opposition is stubborn because it's in fixed signs. Mars is in Scorpio. Uranus is in Taurus. People do not want to compromise, and people don't want to compromise so much that they're prepared to risk, for example, fights. Hopefully not violence, but it can be quite aggressive, and people are going to want to stick to their point of view, even if stubbornness damages their interests. Mars and Uranus is also accident prone. So this weekend, just don't do anything dangerous. Don't take risks. Dangerous sports, martial arts. Don't do anything where there is any possibility of violence. If you're driving, be careful. Stick to the stick to the speed limit. Don't do anything stupid. Don't take risks. So yes, in general, great caution is going to be required. Then, on Sunday, you can see that the moon is starting to move towards an opposition of Jupiter. So moon opposition Jupiter. Emotional excess, but moon in Scorpio is a fixed sign, so is Jupiter, and its moon's in a fixed sign, Jupiter's in a fixed sign. Again, it's more of that Mars-Uranus feel to it, just people being stubborn, too much emotion flying around, but it's not actually, the emotion is not flying. The moon is not in Sagittarius. That moon is not flying, it is stagnating, and it's just getting more and more intense, and it could sort of explode at some stage. So overall, I don't think it's going to be a very good weekend for most of us, all things being equal. Of course, there are other things to consider. It's not just the astrology. Astrology is just one factor to consider. Astrology doesn't explain everything, but if I just look at the weekend from an astrological perspective, it doesn't look great. And I would have said, for most of us, Sunday is probably going to be worse than Saturday. Particularly if you're in Australia, New Zealand, because you're not going to feel Moon in Scorpio on Saturday. You won't get it. You'll get the Moon in Scorpio on Sunday. Okay, so I now want to do my forecasts for the 12 signs for the weekend. So here we go. These are my forecasts for the 12 signs for the weekend of November the 11th and 12th, 2023. Aries. It could be a difficult weekend. You feel yourself to be under pressure, and you'll find it difficult to relax. At the same time, you're attracting trouble, particularly if you're careless or headstrong. Yet, there's something about you that's charismatic, and your sex appeal is at the top of the range. So, perhaps this weekend there's a silver lining. Taurus. Relationships could take up a lot of your time, and this could be a good or a bad thing. Some people could behave really badly, but other people could give you exactly what you want. But if there are problems, consider the possibility that you yourself have some responsibility. Unconsciously, you're just stirring things up. Gemini. Probably not one of your better weekends. You might feel that things are stuck, and if you're mixing with people, you might also feel that they're just not on your wavelength. Perhaps you're trying too hard to assert yourself, and if you took a step back, things could be better. It doesn't take much to completely disrupt people's careful plans. Cancer. The moon is moving into Scorpio. You want to do something special, which marks you out as someone different. And it's perhaps about how you manage to engage your feelings. But maybe you'll become too focused on yourself to the point of missing out crucial details in your immediate environment. A game to some is a threat to others. Leo. You want things to happen, and it might feel that any action is better than no action, but be careful what you wish for. In your efforts to create excitement, you could cause a great deal of instability, especially at home. No, it's probably best to ground yourself in a secure environment. Virgo. Your plans for the weekend need to be given careful consideration. Things you might want to do might not give you the results you expect, and be particularly careful travelling. With Mars making a stressful aspect to Uranus, all sorts of things could go wrong. If in doubt, stay in one place. Libra. You can't help thinking about money. You rationalise that money isn't important, but deep down you know that it's vital. But don't be too desperate. If money is coming your way, then it doesn't have to be rushed. Also, if you talk to people about financial subjects, there could very quickly be arguments and animosity. Scorpio. This weekend, there's an opposition between Mars and Uranus across the main axis of your solar chart at a time when the moon is moving into your star sign. You're well placed to achieve your goals, but there might be a cost in terms of causing upset and chaos. And one particular person can really upset the apple cart. Maybe that person is you, maybe it's someone else. Sagittarius, perhaps you should just stand aside. While there's a lot going on, you have to ask yourself whether you want to get involved. It's unlikely that there will be any benefit in involvement, and the problems involvement may cause could be substantial. By contrast, if you have a temporary retreat, you're giving yourself security and peace of mind. Capricorn, it's important to trust your instincts. You have a good sense of what's wise and what's crazy, but sometimes you can go against your better judgment, perhaps on account of other people's urgings. And this weekend, you know what you should be doing, you know where you shouldn't be going, and you should stick to what you know. Aquarius, you want to make things happen, and you seem unconcerned about the consequences, but the consequences do matter. And you need to consider the impact of your actions, particularly in terms of your home and family. You might then have to consider your priorities and whether getting what you want as quickly as possible is worth the aggravation. Pisces, there's something you want to break free from. It's been holding you back for some time, and you might feel that enough is enough. While there is a temptation to be abrupt, there's probably no need to make a song and dance about it. Just make a firm but private resolution and let everything else sort itself out. Okay, so I'm now going to transition to the I Ching. As always, I asked a question. The question being, what is this weekend going to be like for people watching this video? Now, don't panic when you see the first hexagram. First hexagram I got was hexagram 18, illness. Now, the reason I've called it illness is that I was looking at several translations of the I Ching, and in the Wilhelm translation, 18 is translated as working on what has been spoilt. In the Greg Winkup translation, he calls it illness, and I thought, in a way, that's okay. That sounds quite good. When we hear illness, we shouldn't think that that's necessarily a physical illness. Remembering that an alternative translation is working on what has been spoilt. So something is sick, but there is the implication in I Ching that although it is sick, it can be fixed. So it's not. We're not being. The I Ching is not telling us, oh, there's nothing we can do. Just get over it. Just accept it. No, there's a malady. Something is rotten. Something is in a state of decay. And we can do something about it. So, the advice here is get going on it as soon as possible. Just if something needs to be fixed, sort it out now. Maybe the weekend. You may be planning on relaxing this weekend, but something is not right, and you have the ability to sort it out. So go ahead, sort it out. I think you know what needs to be done. There is a moving line here. Top line is moving. Now, because we've got a moving line, and we were asking about the weekend, I'm thinking that this hexagram of illness, working on what has been spoilt, more relates to Saturday. Because I do see a chronology here. So, when you have a moving hexagram, I see the first hexagram as being more about the present and the past. The second hexagram as being more about the future. So Saturday, we've got to really work on what has been spoilt. If there's some illness, it needs to be fixed. We need to sort that out, and we can sort that out, because the I Ching, it wouldn't be. It's like it doesn't tell us something unless it gives us a solution. So this moves to this 46, pushing upward, making progress. So that's quite optimistic. we can really start making progress. We sort out the problem, we work out what needs to be fixed, and then we can move forward, make progress. Okay, that's not to say we're going to achieve all our goals, but we're going to make good progress. Now, this I Ching perhaps contradicts what I was saying with astrology. Now, when I was talking about the astrology, I was kind of thinking that Saturday would be a better day than Sunday. The I Ching is probably saying the opposite. It's probably saying that Sunday's a better day. Saturday we do the preparations. We sort ourselves out, we fix the problem, then Sunday we're able to move forward, we're able to push upwards and get our plans off the ground. So I'm now going to look at the Mars-Uranus opposition and what it might mean. And the first chart I want to look at is the chart for the discovery of Uranus. Uranus is the first discovered planet, and it was discovered on March the 13th, 1781, I think at around 10:30 p.m. in Bath in England. So the theory is that if you look at the chart for the discovery, you might get some idea about what the planet actually means. And at the time of the discovery of Uranus, the American Revolutionary War was in full swing. That perhaps colours what the planet Uranus is about. It is about revolutions. That's certainly one aspect of it. And to be more specific, here's the discovery chart. Mars was exactly opposition Uranus, or pretty exactly opposition Uranus, and Saturn was opposition Uranus as well, and there was a Mars-Saturn conjunction. And I think this does colour the meaning. Uranus does have a Mars quality. It also has a Saturn quality. There is a violent quality to Uranus with this Mars-Saturn opposition, with this Mars and Saturn being opposition it when it was discovered. And you look at the T-square. The Sun was at 23 Pisces, was square the Mars-Saturn conjunction, was square Uranus. So this very violent square between the Sun and the Mars-Saturn conjunction was what was kind of attracting the discovery of Uranus. And so Uranus was discovered at a time of violence. Imagine you've got a chart. Just the moment before Uranus was discovered, and you see the Sun square Saturn, Mars, Saturn, and then suddenly Uranus pops up, and so that immediately colours it. Suddenly you've got this extra arm of the T-square, and so this does underline the violence and the violent nature of Uranus and how it can often be associated with death and destruction, and as well as the overthrow of things. The Sun is being squared by Mars-Saturn conjunction, and by Uranus. So I think that discovery is certainly interesting. Now, as far as events are concerned, the final German offensive at the end of the Second World War was the Battle of the Bulge. So this started, I believe, on December the 16th, 1944. I went for sort of 5:30 a.m. somewhere in eastern France. I went for Strasbourg. I'm sure military enthusiasts will come up with something more precise. So Battle of the Bulge was the final attempt by the Germans to sort of turn the tide. You can imagine these columns of panzers moving westward, destroying things in their wake. In the first contacts with the Americans took really heavy casualties. It appeared to be a bit of a disaster for the Americans. I think you had quite raw recruit troops coming. So to begin with, it was quite successful, but in the end, it ran out of steam. and it was driven back. But there's that Mars opposition. There's that Mars opposition Uranus trying to break the deadlock, and that the violence of columns of tanks, I think, so we can see that might be an image we can perhaps use with the Mars Uranus opposition. Then 8 years later, we had another event, an even more dramatic event, the first hydrogen bomb. October the 31st, 1952, 7:15 p.m. Somewhere in the Pacific. You can see that Mars was at 14 Capricorn, Uranus was at 18 Cancer. So Mars-Uranus opposition, hydrogen bomb, the incredible violence of the hydrogen bomb, and how we can associate that with Mars-Uranus opposition. So that's another image. We've got the panzers rolling across eastern France. We've got the hydrogen bomb. That kind of fits with a conventional view of what the Mars-Uranus opposition might be about. Now, before looking at people with Mars-Uranus oppositions, I want to look at people with Mars-Uranus conjunctions. Because sometimes, to understand an opposition, we need to think about what does a conjunction mean. Now, a conjunction is going to be much more natural than the opposition, because the two planets are in the same place. They don't have to struggle to find some way of relating to each other. So, if you've got a Mars-Uranus conjunction, you're perhaps a natural revolutionary. You're naturally able to cause chaos. You're naturally able to be angry and dynamic, perhaps. So let's look at someone with a Mars-Uranus conjunction. Someone I've talked about before, Klaus Schwab, founder of the World Economic Forum, and he has a Mars-Uranus conjunction in Taurus. He was able to begin a revolutionary process with his founding of the World Economic Forum, which I think met for the first time in 1971 in Davos in Switzerland. So he was an initiator. He didn't have to struggle to cause a revolution. He was in control of this thing. He started it. Mars-Uranus conjunctions can be very stubborn, particularly if they're in Taurus. He has a view that he's right, that he understands the way the world is going. He knows what the world needs. He believes that some kind of revolution is required. Okay, not a violent revolution, but some revolution where we have a more transnational approach to government, where the elites can mix, and this is a way to solve the world's problems. And that's Mars-Uranus. It is very revolutionary, but it's him. He started it. There's no struggle there. Another person with a Mars-Uranus conjunction is journalist Piers Morgan. There's his Mars-Uranus conjunction in Virgo. He is someone who, whatever you think of him, he's very effective. First as a sort of written journalist and editor of tabloid newspapers, and then on TV, video, whatever. He comes over as being sort of angry, self-assured, very strident in his opinions, someone who can stir things up. He doesn't have to struggle to do it. It's easy for him because it's a conjunction. Although in Piers Morgan's case, it's given added strength by the fact that in the mid-1960s there was this Saturn-Uranus opposition, and so his Mars was tied in with this Saturn-Uranus opposition, and also we don't know his time. I don't know his time of birth, but at noon, Moon was at 9 Pisces, so it was opposition his Mars perhaps. So yeah, so in the case of Piers Morgan and Klaus Schwab, with their Mars-Uranus conjunctions, they are in control. It's them. They are the initiators. With the opposition, there may be more struggle, at least in theory. But actually, what happens in practice? So let's look at the chart of Anthony Fauci. He is obviously a very divisive figure. I'm not expressing an opinion on him. I've been vaxxed so many times I can't remember. That's just me. But he has Mars in Scorpio. Mars in Scorpio is him, male planet, a man with Mars in Scorpio, and its opposition Uranus. In his case, he's very strident. I think he has strong opinions. He believes he's right. Certainly, that was the impression we got during the pandemic. But what happened with his Mars-Uranus opposition, consciously or unconsciously, is that he was causing unrest. A lot of people opposed what he was saying. He became a hate figure for a lot of people. He became a cause of protests, demonstrations, not just in America, but around the world. And I think to an extent that was his Mars-Uranus opposition. Somehow he was attracting this. So that may be how the Mars-Uranus opposition, in his case, was working. And it's a very close Mars-Uranus opposition. Okay, I don't have his time of birth, but it's looks to me pretty exact. 22:33 at noon plays 22:42 Taurus. So a very exact Mars-Uranus opposition. And notice he was born December the 24th, 1940. In fact, that was so he was born just at the beginning of the Second World War. So that was the first Mars-Uranus opposition of the Second World War, was when Anthony Fauci was born. It is what he's attracting. And he seems to be attracting protest, unrest, controversy, and that may be how the Mars-Uranus opposition is working in his case. So let's look at someone else. What about Amy Coney Barrett? Now, Amy Coney Barrett is a Supreme Court justice. Someone who is clearly on the conservative right. She is very religious, involved in some religious group or sect, which came up a lot when she was trying to get confirmation for her place in the Supreme Court. Remember, she was a Trump pick, and so she has Saturn. She has a Mars-Saturn opposition. Now it may be, but like Fauci, she was at an unconscious level attracting protest and controversy. But the Mars-Uranus opposition may actually be about her stubborn ideology. Mars in Aries, opposition Uranus. Mars in Aries, she has strong opinions. Mars in Aries, opposition Uranus. She may be struggling at some level to implement some kind of revolution. Saturn, Mars-Uranus can be about revolution, maybe through violence, but maybe through just being a Supreme Court judge. So this might indicate an activist judge having Mars-Uranus opposition, and so she's certainly causing a lot of controversy. Again, must emphasize, I'm not expressing an opinion here about Amy Coney Barrett. I'm just pointing this out. And she's got Mercury, T-square. Mercury square her Uranus, square her Mars. So, even in what she says, in her judgments, she is someone who is capable of causing controversy. And, remember, she's she's seriously anti-abortion, and so that's why one of the reasons Trump appointed her. But abortion is becoming a very controversial issue. It always has been a controversial issue, but as a controversial issue, it is not going to go away. Another woman who's got a Mars-Uranus opposition is Monica Lewinsky. Now, I don't think Monica Lewinsky is a revolutionary, but in the 90s, she was an intern in the White House who had sexual contact with the president, Bill Clinton, and it all got out, and it caused an earthquake. And Bill Clinton it almost destroyed the Bill Clinton presidency. So she goes into the White House as an intern with a Mars-Uranus opposition, and this is what she attracts. Maybe it's sort of Little Miss Chaos having Mars-Uranus opposition. She didn't mean to. She didn't mean it to happen like this, but it did happen. And so maybe she wasn't in full control of her Mars-Uranus opposition, and it because she wasn't using it in a constructive way, it started to be used in other ways. And so that was perhaps what was going on as an activist. Sorry, we're talking about activism. I think she's become more of an activist, more vocal, and maybe she's more able now. Now she's just turned 50. So as a 50-year-old woman, she's possibly more in control of that Mars-Uranus opposition, and that underlies a key point in astrology. It's important to live out your chart. If you don't live out your chart and you have an aspect like Mars-Uranus opposition which you're not living out, you're in denial of, then that Mars-Uranus could appear somewhere else, and you don't know where it's going to impact her. So that's how I think Mars-Uranus was affecting Monica Lewinsky. Certainly, as a young woman, as an intern, she was just the source of chaos. In a way, similar, you could say the same thing about Anthony Fauci. He just thought he was just being a doctor, just being the sensible, just being the expert on, what was he, director of the National Institute of, what was it, allergy and infectious medicine or whatever. Just thought he was just doing his job. But no, it caused a lot of drama. Someone else would be the last person I want to look at. The penultimate person. Actually, I want to look at Nikki Haley. So Nikki Haley, she is a candidate for the Republican nomination. And she was governor of South Carolina. She has got a Mars-Uranus opposition. Now, I don't think so far, at least in a public sense, we've seen her cause chaos. I don't think we've seen that. She was Trump's pick to be U.S. ambassador at the UN. I think from a mainstream point of view, she did a good job, apparently. Although, of course, she is a neocon. She's an advocate of American interventionism. I think her foreign policy views on foreign policy will be disastrous for the U.S. If she became president, though, or, for example, Secretary of State, I would guess if there was a Republican, if Trump wins, I don't know what his relationship with Nikki Haley is at the moment, but she might be a potential pick to be Secretary of State, but some stage when she gets to those kinds of position, like President or Secretary of State in the future, she's still relatively young. She's only 51. So she could occupy those high positions at a future state. Then we might want to worry about that Mars-Uranus opposition, because then it might start to manifest. And because of that Mars-Uranus opposition, probably wouldn't want her to be president or Secretary of State, for example. But yeah, with her, I don't think we've yet seen the potential of that Mars-Uranus opposition. Final person I want to look at is Hunter Biden. I think Hunter Biden does fit the pattern of people with Mars-Uranus oppositions attracting things, bringing things down which they weren't fully intending. Hunter Biden has caused problems for his father, and he has caused problems for the White House. And there's this continuous controversy about Hunter Biden and laptops and Ukraine and China and whatever. It's really complicated. I don't really understand it myself, but it's that Mars-Uranus. He is bringing chaos, bringing controversy, bringing difficulties through his Mars-Uranus opposition, though one should say that in his case, the Mars-Uranus opposition has a tragic dimension. He was, when he was, I think, 2 years old, he was involved in an accident with his mother driving, in which his sister was killed, and him and his brother were seriously hurt, and of course his mother was killed. That must have been a complete scar on him, and that must tell us something about that Mars-Uranus. If I wanted to be, it sounds a bit unkind, but one could say, having a child with a Mars-Uranus opposition in your car, when you have this accident, maybe he was attracting the accident at some level because of that Mars-Uranus opposition. Or maybe that's just the way it happened. That was all part of that accident. When was it? So December 1972, I think. He was all part of that accident. Joe Biden's wife having this accident with a child with Mars-Uranus, with a Mars-Uranus opposition. That was just part of the event. Okay, those are a few thoughts on the Mars-Uranus opposition. I think perhaps the main takeaway is that if you've got a Mars-Uranus opposition in your chart, it's very important to live it out. You need to work it out. How are you going to use that Mars-Uranus opposition? Because if you don't use it, it might manifest in other ways. And you might, for example, be causing chaos, upset, if you're in politics, demonstrations, without even knowing how. It just happens. And of course, the most extreme example is Monica Lewinsky. She had the Mars-Uranus opposition, and look at the impact of her in terms of the Clinton White House. Okay, that's all I'm going to say about the Mars-Uranus opposition. I hope you found that useful, and I will talk to you again on Monday.